If we fail to recognize the sovereignty of God, that has significant impacts on the way that we worship. We tend to be more man-centered. We tend to focus on ourselves, on our feelings, on our experience, when we're not actually focusing on the greatness of God, the sovereignty of God, the rule of God over all things. I think that kind of perspective has unfortunately plagued evangelical Christianity for many, many years, really beginning and climaxing with the work of Charles G. Finney, who was very man-centered, denied the sovereignty of God over salvation, even over the nature of revival and the nature of spiritual growth. Finney was at best an Arminian, at worst a Pelagian who denied original sin, and who believed that it was actually the responsibility and work of the preacher to bring a person to conversion or to see spiritual growth and revival. Again, a rejection of the sovereignty of God and an elevation of man's role in the saving and sanctification of God's people. So that led to very man-centered worship. Much of evangelicalism today has been impacted by that theology to the degree that when God's people gather to worship, even those who have recovered more of a reformed soteriology, we still have these vestiges of man-centeredness in our worship. And so we may intellectually and verbally affirm the greatness and sovereignty of God, but nevertheless, our worship still tends to be more man-centered, where we think that we are the ones who are initiating the worship. It is the preacher's job or the worship leader's job to move people to conversion, to move people to spiritual growth, to move people to experiencing worship. That still is within the vestiges of what we see within evangelicalism. This is why it is so important that we recover a robust conviction and affirmation of the sovereignty of God, not just in the realm of salvation, which is very important, not just in the realm of Christian living and other aspects of our theology, which all are very important, but even in our worship. Our God is great. He has created us to worship Him. He is the sovereign over all things. God is the sovereign King, and we were created in order to bow before Him, in order to glorify Him, in order to worship Him. And that acknowledgement of the sovereignty of God needs to infuse our theology and practice of worship, where we recognize that we are not the initiators of a worship experience. It is not what we do that brings us into the presence of God, for example. No worship leader, no music, no atmospheric influences can bring us into the presence of God. No, God is the one, the sovereign ruler over all things, is the one who has called us to worship. We are unworthy as sinners to worship Him in His presence, but He has provided the means by which we can enter the presence of a holy God through the sacrifice of His Son, Jesus Christ. So a recovery of the sovereignty of God in our worship is very critical for the evangelical church today.